Rev Berg, welcome to the first episode of the Growth Oriented Podcast.
I love that name. First of all, I don't think I knew until this second that it was called the Growth Oriented Podcast. I think the Rosh Hashiva would be pleased to know that it's called the Growth Oriented Podcast. I
It
know
was
that's a
heavily
big buzzword.
inspired. I was heavily inspired by it. I want to start by exploring this concept, which is really the core subject of the podcast, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts. I want to open up with this idea of balance that I think people, certainly I struggle with, but certainly people who are from Jews who are in the workforce, they are creators, entrepreneurs, business owners, and there's this existential and practical and emotional struggle that it extends to almost every aspect of their lives, I think, where they're struggling to balance this idea of the pursuit of business success, the pursuit of whether it's making a lot of money, having a huge impact, pursuing what they're passionate about, while also cultivating within themselves a deep sense of religious growth and sometimes not even growth, I think content and like I'm happy with where I am. Obviously I want to be more, I want to grow more. So I want to start by exploring that struggle. The question is, what does balance mean? What is the concept of balance? If it's a relative term for everyone, then what does it mean?
Well, it's a really powerful question. And to be honest with you, I think it's a really beautiful idea for a podcast. And I think you're right. I think we're all struggling with this, whether you're in business or whether you're in chinuch. I think the human condition is to struggle with balance. And perhaps we could even say that the goal of creation is to create order out of the chaos. So maybe the first thing to really delve into is to understand that the lack of serenity that we have when we're in this lack of balance, right? What's called pizur hanefesh, the state of feeling fragmented, the state of feeling disconnected. That's a function of the reality that we live in. We live in an unbalanced reality. We live in a reality of pizur, and sort of like the Pesach Seder is the model, right? We're here to create Seder out of the chaos. We're always in that process of leaving Mitzrayim and coming out of the chaos of slavery, moving towards Har Sinai, which would be this process of creating balance that perhaps culminates with Har Sinai, Eretz Yisrael, Beis HaMikdash, Shemos HaMashiach. But I think the first thing we need to do is normalize it. I think for so many of us, and including for myself, anybody who's struggling with, I have a family, I have a wife, I have children, I have religious, not just obligations, but a religious mission. I have the reality that I need to engage the world in order to provide for my family. I love what you said before about I want to make an impact on the world. We feel pulled in so many different directions. And so the lack of serenity that we have is a function of the lack of balance. And the lack of balance is because we're being pulled in so many different directions. Is that a good place to start? Does that make sense?
Sure. So I guess I would want to ask if how does being content with that and I guess giving yourself grace and saying like this is okay, how does that maybe solve the problem? And is it maybe a way to cope, or is it a way of solving the problem, would you say?
Yeah, so I love that word grace also, but I don't know if grace solves the problem. But perhaps what it does is it greases the wheels for us to do the work.
Hmm.
When I think somebody else has this figured out and I don't have it figured out, so then there's something wrong with me. Why am I failing at this? And the answer is you're not failing at this. This is what it means to be human. This is, as we'll see soon, God willing, this is the mission for which we were created. It's like imagine somebody came onto a basketball court and they're like, dribbling is hard, shooting is hard. It's right. Yeah, that's the nature of the game. So we're born into an unbalanced world. We have a lack of serenity, a certain pizur hanefesh. It's not just that we're trying to get menuchas hanefesh so that we could fulfill our mission. Menuchas hanefesh is the mission. So, and that's why Yaakov Avinu was bikesh leishev b'shalva. He was seeking serenity. The search for serenity is the fulfillment of the mission. So knowing that what we go through is not only normal, but it's the mission for which we were created relieves me of the burden of feeling like I'm incapable. So the grace that you spoke about is the grace of knowing I'm okay to do this, even though I feel like I'm failing at this all the time. This is like you're supposed to fail. This is the process.
Right, and that ties into this concept of shame. And no one, I don't think anyone is openly discussing this or sharing this. But I think, at least on a deep level, I'd hope, or I shouldn't hope, because shame is, I don't think, a constructive emotion necessarily. Maybe it is. You'll correct me if I'm wrong. But I think people, at least who I'm like my peers and people who are like, where I'm at, definitely have this feeling of like, I'm not doing enough. And, time's ticking away, especially, Baruch Hashem, I have a kid. Amazing, but time is flying by. Like, it's 3 months just flew by, and like, I'm like, what just happened? And it's scary because like, what did I accomplish in the last 3 months? What did I, how have I grown? What was there something that I was trying to work on? What was my 90-day goal? And I'm not talking about business. I'm talking about spiritual growth. And I fear for so many of us. I look at like guys, like these older guys in shul when I'm davening, and I'm like, I'm not judging in any way, but like you can tell, like they don't seem happy. They don't seem content. I might be wrong. Maybe that's me judging. There's a fear, and there's a sense of fear and a sense of shame.
Tzvi, you and I have known each other now for quite a number of years. How many years has it been?
Since 2020, oh, good, almost 5 years now.
Almost 5 years.
Yeah,
I just want to acknowledge for a second how far you've come in your own language, your ability to express yourself around these words: fear, shame, hope. These are grace. These are very powerful words. There's different ways of using the word shame. I think the way that you are using the word shame, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the belief that I'm unworthy of love and connection. I'm not enough. And therefore, like, what am I doing here? I'm not enough. Maybe I'm not enough religiously. Maybe I'm not enough for my spouse. A general sense of unworthiness that comes from shame. I'm not sure that's how everyone uses shame. But yes, while that is deeply human, I think every human being struggles with worthiness. I would agree with you that seen through that prism, I don't know how helpful shame is. On the other hand, I hear you speaking about the fear of like time is flying by. I had a kid 3 months ago. I'll share with you, I'm a grandfather twice over, and my other daughter is expecting now, so I'll be a
that's
grandfather, God
awesome.
willing, with 3 kids. And I blinked. In my mind, I'm still 18 years old, just arriving to Mevaseret, and it's been 28, 29 years now. So yeah, I can tell you time flies. Maybe it would be a little helpful here to reframe the fear, right? Because your fear here is an ally, right? The fear is saying, I really want to be enough. And I really want to have an impact. And I really want to be passionate about my Judaism. And when I look around and I see people that are checking the box, that protective system that you have that's showing up and going like, I better create a podcast so that we can talk about this because I don't
Yeah.
want the world to be like this for me. So is it fear or is it yearning? Right?
Mm.
I'm not sure that when we frame it as fear, I'm not even for sure, forget if it's helpful or not. I'm not even sure if it's true. The fear speaks to a deeper yearning that I want to live a balanced life. I want to have an impact. I want to take all of these things that I'm doing and somehow unify them in such a way that I don't feel this pizer nefesh. I don't feel this state of being scattered and fragmented. And life can really pass me by if I'm not paying attention. So I want to get conscious. I want to actualize my yearnings so that something real will come of all this, so that I can be able to say at the end, I've arrived at the destination of my life, and this is the impact that I've had, and this is the growth that I did. And again, I think those are really beautiful things.
I want to talk about setting expectations for yourself. This is I think it's somewhat commonly spoken about, at least amongst my friends, my peers, guys who are maybe a few years after yeshiva. Although I think I want to speak to really people who are maybe 10, 20 years after yeshiva, who are maybe still struggling with this. Obviously you go to yeshiva, and you have this heightened expectation of yourself. You say, whoa, my potential is much greater than I thought it was. I was speaking with, my friend, your Talmud from Yeshiva, Shmuel Barg. Shout out Shmuel Barg.
My friend too.
Your friend too. There you go. And he made this beautiful analogy of like, you get a house in Miami, and you have all this space. I'm going to make a big pool. I have all this water coming in. I need to contain all the water. I need a huge pool. And you move out of Miami, and you or whatever it is, like you I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of the muscle, but like the point is maybe the water starts flowing in a little less, and you still have this big pool, right? You still have this big empty pool, and it's like maybe like halfway or like 30% or 20%. And like, oh, I don't have as much water flowing in anymore. I have this huge pool. So kind of like the same idea is like I have this huge expectation of myself. I left, I left Shiva, went into the workforce. I started working. I started my own business. Some people got an internship. They went to college. Mm, Maybe it's a structured thing. Maybe it's not. What's the avoda? What's the how does one even? I don't even know how to begin to. I don't even know how to address the issue. I just know that sticks out in my mind. Is like you have this heightened idea of your potential and you're not meeting it.
It doesn't surprise me at all that Shmuel had such a beautiful mashal.
Of
Definitely doesn't surprise me that you guys were talking about it.
course.
Yeah, one of the gifts of yeshiva is the opportunity to step back and say, so what do I want this thing to look like? How do I, I'm on this sort of hamster wheel, in our community of like, this is who I am. And it's sort of like kind of built into the system.
Got to keep going.
And you never have the opportunity really to step back and say, like, what do I want? What am I capable of? Right. And especially at those formative years, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, you sort of get to realize, like, whoa, I could do a lot. Right. And then what happens is that the expectation is enormous, but success is a slow drip. Right. So I'm not sure if the expectations are the problem. Right. Or the expectation of how quickly I'll be successful is the problem. Is a, it's not just a virtue. It's critical because you look at yourself when you're in your 20s, right? And the growth is, I think I heard Rav Isaacson give this mashal once in yeshiva, and I think he was quoting somebody else, but I forget who. The plane when it's taking off, it's very exciting. You're
Yeah.
climbing to those 30,000 feet very fast, but you're not actually making headway. You're not going to your destination when you're moving at that climbing in altitude. It's sort of when you taper off, and then it doesn't appear as exciting. Of course, you are moving fast, but you don't realize it, right? So you turn around not when you're 25. You turn around when you're 30 and you go, whoa, I never thought I could get here. Right. And you turn around when you're 40 and you go, whoa, I never thought I could get here. As long as you stay conscious and aware and you're still taking those steps. But the dramatic growth of an 18-year-old is not the way life works, at least for me. But I think for everybody, really. So the expectation of myself that I'm destined to have an impact on this world, absolutely. I would say don't ever let go of that. Right. Perhaps it's going to look different than you thought, right? Because at 18, you didn't know what it was like to be married. Certainly, you don't know what it's like to have a kid. And even though Baruch Hashem, now you have a 3-month-old, um, let's keep talking for many years to come. But call me back when you have a teenager.
Yeah.
The growth that happens in those years when you're no longer in control of your child.
Hmm.
That's real growth. And it's not even growth that you could expect to happen right now. And it's not growth that you perhaps considered when you were 18. So there's a difference between I'm born for greatness. That's a great expectation to have. Recognizing that you have talents and potential that you really want to exercise and actualize in this world. That's real. Maybe letting go of some of the expectations around timing and what that looks like, because it might be much better than you thought it would be. As you thought I was going to be great in this direction, turns out you're going to be great in this direction. I mean, as Mivasar boys, the two of us, we look at our Rosh Hashiva who literally was a lawyer. And his expectation for greatness was, I'm going to make partner, I'm going to be a lawyer, and that's going to be my life. And then the greatness found itself somewhere completely different. So I'm not sure we know how this thing unfolds. And maybe one of the challenges is that we get locked into our definition of success. And maybe we don't know what success looks like.
I think the community plays a huge role on this as well. I think that the standard, everything's relative when you're in a community because everything means something different for everyone else. Growth means something different for everyone else. But also, I think that the community can sometimes may not bring people down. I don't want to speak harshly against, our community. Obviously, I love our community and in every sect. I think, there's so much beauty. But for example, we touched on this idea of community before. Like this, there's a sense of like when you're like an adult and you have kids, it's like you're just so tired and lazy and exhausted that like there's just no time. Like oh, I don't have time to learn. Oh, I don't. And like some people do it, and that's awesome. I think most people really struggle with it. Even the people who do it struggle with it. But like, there's two examples that come to mind. The first one is literally, I live in a building where it's predominantly a Jewish, Jewish residence in an apartment. So we have like a minyan, a mincha and mariv every single day. And like you go and it's just like people are just ready to leave. Like they're done. Like people are leave after Aleinu before last Kaddish, like before David and it's Elzman now, myself included. I'll go out and say like sometimes like I'm in my mind is telling, oh, I need to go. I need to go. Sometimes I actually do have to go. But like usually I kind of just make up some excuse to leave early. And I'm ashamed of that a little bit. But that's the first example of like this idea of like when it comes to davening, it's just like like let's just get through it. Like there's like what everyone else is doing it. That's like how the community. And if you're the one guy in the minyan who's like who's clearly getting into it, or whether they see or not, it's like you're one of those guys. Another example is like singing Zmiros on Shabbos. Like you have guests coming over. Like I experience all the time. And not to say anything negatively or harshly about my friends, and I love them, but like I'm hesitant to say, "Hey guys, let's sing a Zemer." Like we're schmoozing, we're talking about this, like and it's like it's not cool. So I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Again, I think it's so beautiful because what I'm hearing you say is the yearning to have that davening and the yearning to have that Shabbos table with those miros. And I think what you're seeing in the community is it's not that we don't want those things. We do. I think what you're seeing is exhaustion. It's really, really, really tiring. Our expectations of ourselves as Jews in this world with all of these various responsibilities is enormous. I did a different podcast once and I got called out for this on the podcast. And they said, "You're making it seem like it's so hard to be a Jew." And I said, it's really beautiful to be a Jew, but I think we do need to give a voice of compassion that says the expectation that we have of ourselves is enormous. And it's real. It's really enormous.
And I think someone's lying to themselves or others if they say that it's not.
Right. Two things could be true at once. I could think this is the most beautiful thing in the world. I think it could be inspiring. And it could also be really challenging when I feel like I'm being pulled in these different directions. Davening has always been hard throughout history. The Gemara says davening is the highest thing in the world that always gets trampled on. And it's not just because it's about saying the same words every day from the siddur. It's because it's hard to be passionately davening when I have so many responsibilities on my plate. If we think about even what it takes, if you're living, let's say, in corporate America, right, to have a dafyomi, a 45-minute dafyomi, a 35 to 40-minute davening, Myriv could be, again, you have it in your building. Even if you have to drive 5 minutes till you drive, till you park, till you get there, till you leave, till you get home, a person could easily be talking about 2.5 hours of their day, and that's just when it comes to their davening and learning. And if you have to go to the city and be in the city for 9 hours a day, so the travel could get you to 10 hours right there, depending on where you're living. And so you're talking about a 12.5 hour day, and you haven't yet spoken about being a husband or being a father. And especially as the kids get older, you want to be around, help them with homework, go to their games, go to Little League on Sundays. Like, yeah, like the expectation that we've set of ourselves, the yearning that we have is enormous. So the first thing I would say is we have to normalize it. The second thing I would say is it's an awesome opportunity to go back to the questions that we asked ourselves when we were younger and say, okay, who do I want to be? Right? Because that's ultimately the question that we ask of ourselves when we're in yeshiva, 18, 19, 20 years old. Who do I want to be? And we set this intention that I'm going to be passionate about my Judaism, that my children are going to grow up in a home where there are Zmiros at the Shabbos table and there are Divrei Torah and there isn't Lashon Hara. We're trashing the rabbi, and I want to be a person that has a rebbe, and I want to be a person that my kid looks over and sees me really davening. So this is where the rubber meets the road. So reminding ourselves, this is my intention. It can be imperfect. It could be messy. It could be sloppy, but I want to stay loyal to that vision that I have for myself. And then there's this third point that you brought up, which is it's hard to do it when we're not necessarily surrounded by it. So when we're in yeshiva and we're in that growth oriented place and kind of everyone's doing that growth together and you have no other responsibilities, it's like dunking when you're 10 feet tall. Yeah, that's pretty easy. But now I'm 25 years old 30 years old. I'm at a Shabbos table. I have my buddies over and we're having a good chill. And we need that chill because we're exhausted. And I want to say, come on, guys, let's go. So if the guys are like, oh, man, I'm just not down. Yeah, I get it. I get it. I think if the Rosh Hashiva was here, he would say that's the value of having that growth oriented chevra, right? Living in that community where it's high on the agenda, maybe number one on the agenda, as we'll speak about. But I totally get it. I totally get it. I think it's totally normal. Just because it's difficult doesn't mean we should let go of the yearning. But just because we're yearning for it doesn't mean that we shouldn't acknowledge how challenging it really is. If we were living in a world where it wasn't challenging, what would the value be? Playing basketball when you're by yourself on the court is not as geschmack as playing in a 5-on-5 pickup game, which is not as geschmack as playing in a league game when there's a ref. You want to be maximally challenged because that's where greatness is. So on the one hand, I hear what you're saying. It is really hard. And by the way, it's hard if you're in chinuch also. We're also exhausted. Everyone's exhausted. Even though Rebbeim act as if they're always inspired, it's not true. Everyone's a human being. Maybe we're inspired intellectually, but to bring that, from your head to your heart, which is the greatest distance in the world. And yeah, we don't always want to be that person. Sometimes we're just bone tired. So I think it's totally, totally normal. And yet, this is the mission for which we were created.
I appreciate you saying that. And like that's something that I'm thinking about, like when I'm in that minion with all those guys, and I think to myself, like, is this how it should be? Like, is this the ideal? So maybe to a certain extent, the answer is yes and no. I think to a certain extent, the answer is yes, because of what you're saying is that like it's ideal in the sense that it's a challenge and it's difficult. It's maybe not ideal in the sense that like maybe we could be doing more. And again, like that's where we're at. Like that's really what I'm personally like at is that little space in between those two. It it is hard and it's supposed to be hard. And if it weren't hard, then it wouldn't be as meaningful. But we could be doing more. Like we could, So yeah.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I think you were saying it perfectly until you said the word but.
Oh,
It's really hard,
and
and I
yeah,
yearn to be doing more, and I'm trying to bridge the gap between where I really am and where I really want to be. So it's not
interesting.
a but because it doesn't undo. Just because I'm not doing as much as I want to be doing doesn't mean that it negates what I have done and the very real challenge. We can hold space for both of those things at once. This is hard. It's designed to be hard. We were born into a chaotic, fragmented, scattered world. We're here to make order of that world. That process is not a simple process. And I yearn to be doing more than I am. And I'm really having trouble putting together this puzzle.
I want to shift focus for a second. This is something that actually I brought up to you in yeshiva because I was first introduced to this concept of hustle culture, primarily on like these fake Instagram accounts. And so I'll just preface it by saying that I don't think hustle culture is a healthy mindset. However, when you look at the most, let's say, when it comes to really business and starting companies, the most successful people did hustle. So on the one hand, one cannot say that hustle culture is not conducive to a healthy, successful life when the people who have built financially successful lives really, really, really worked hard and they sacrificed a lot. So what would you say is the Torah's perspective on hustle culture?
I certainly don't speak for the Torah's perspective, but I can share
Right.
with you a Torah's perspective.
Sure.
First of all, again, I think the question is brilliant, and I think you're right. Anything great is going to require hard work, and it's also going to require sacrifice. I mean that's where it gets really hard because I love this. I love words in general, but years ago somebody pointed out to me that the word decide, side means to kill, like suicide, homicide, genocide, right? When you decide something, it means you killed off other options, right? And so the question becomes, if I want to achieve greatness, what am I willing to kill off in order to achieve that greatness? And so this really goes back to this original question that we're asking, which is how do I create order out of the chaos? And I think, you pointed out it's Elul before, and then he says, Lachalo, right? He gives this whole laundry list of things. But what David HaMelech begins with is one thing I ask of God, I want to sit in his house. And then the question becomes, well, what's with all the other things then? If you only want one thing, what's with all the other things? And the answer is, or perhaps an answer is, to correct myself, what we're trying to do is live a life of unity, that all those fragmented, scattered pieces sort of work together symbiotically. So if I were to kill off something that's really important towards fulfilling my mission, right? Like think about like a CEO, right? So a CEO has to make decisions every day within the company. The company has a certain amount of money. Where am I going to put those resources? Right. But if the CEO cuts off a fundamental part of the company, the mission of the company can't be fulfilled. The CEO is the one who has to have the ultimate vision that all of these various parts are really working together to arrive at this very specific goal. I like the Walter Isaacson book about Steve Jobs.
I brought it up yesterday with someone.
Yeah,
I'm actively reading it. It's great.
not surprising that we like the same books.
I love it.
And one of the things that Steve Jobs was amazing at is cutting out all the nonsense and just staying focused on like, these are the 3 or 4 things that we're going to work on this year that we're going to perfect. Lots of companies get very scattered and they're doing these ancillary things that don't help you arrive at that achasha'alti, one thing I want. David Amel said, I want one thing. I want to live with Hashem in this house. I want to build for Hashem a dira b'tachtonim. I want to have a dwelling place in the world down below with Hashem. Everything has to fit into that. So here's where hustle culture fails. Hustle culture says, I'm not going to have a marriage. I'm not going to be a parent. I'm just going to focus on building this business. And the reason why that's terrible is because why are you building that business? And so let's take it out even of the religious scope for a moment, even though I think these things are certainly religious also, or maybe even primarily. But let's say the whole reason I have a job is because I want to make the money in order to support my family. Right? So, but you won't be a dad to your family if you're in this hustle culture mindset of I have to give everything to the company. Why are you giving everything to the company? You lost sight of what's your mission to begin with. So I can share with you growing up, my dad was super busy and he was very matzliach in business, Baruch Hashem, and he really provided for us in a beautiful way growing up. And he worked really hard to do that. If you asked me, looking back, what are my best memories of my father? I knew that whenever my father could, even if he was flying, he tried his best to fly home that night, even if it meant flying off in the morning. And I would often see him, leaving our house, running to JFK, and then he'd come back that night because he wanted to sleep at home. He wanted his family to know we were the most important thing. Shabbos morning, we davened Hashkama Minyan, and then we used to have a great Fleishik's Kiddush right after Hashkama Minyan. That's how I grew up. I grew up in the days of Romanian pastrami at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Shabbos morning is
When Kiddush used to be great.
Yeah, is none of this milchiks Kiddush business. I grew up Fleishiks. And then we would go home. My mother would go to shul. She liked going to a much longer davening than my father, and then my father loved that. But he would spend time with us playing games, and that's my dad taught me chess and card games and Stratego, and we had all these like great memories of sitting on the floor in my living room playing games with my dad. And then Sunday afternoons, he was my little league coach, right? And I knew that my dad, had other places to be, but we felt that we were his main thing, that the money was meant to service the family. He wasn't doing it as a means by and for itself. Where hustle culture fails is, of course, you're going to have to work hard to do something great. The challenges of hustle culture is like, well, you have to be singular focused. You have to be singular focused in a way that incorporates all the other elements of your life. If the 6 days of the week are scattered, Shabbos, which is Shabbos Menucha, gives you that sense of serenity, right? Serenity of Shabbos is that it ties together all of the 6 days of the week. That's why we say Hayom Yom Rishon l'Shabbos, Hayom Yom Sheni l'Shabbos. These are all movements in one direction. That's how we balance things. So hustle culture, of course, you want to do something great, dedicate your life to it. Question is, what's the it that you're dedicating your life to? Now you'll say, okay, but this is really hard because in the Jewish community, if you're living in the tri-state area, you need to make $250,000 to be poor, right?
It's
And
true.
and and maybe nestled within that conversation is a more profound conversation of, did we raise the bar too high in terms of success in the material world? And of course, any reasonable person is going to turn around and say, maybe we raised the bar too high, but it also costs us $10,000 to send our kids to camp and $30,000 to send our kids to yeshiva. And so you're telling me we raised the bar too high. I'm telling you that I have 3 kids and I'm spending $120,000 a year just on tuition. So it's not like I'm living in a mansion. And this is a very complex conversation, certainly not one that I have the answer to. But I think the challenge of hustle culture is I want to be successful because I want to provide for my family in a meaningful way. And I feel like I'm killing off the very thing that I'm making the money for. I don't get to spend enough time with my wife. I don't get to spend enough time with my kids. I don't get to spend enough time with myself, my own religious growth, and I am exhausted. And I think that's because we lost sight of the Acha Sha'alti. That's the challenge. What's that fundamental mission?
I love that you brought up Shabbos because this is something that I think about a lot. I'm very blessed to have so far successfully, in my opinion, started a video production company and enough that I can afford and pay my bills and not really heavily rely on outside help. Like, really, it's like a tremendous, tremendous blessing. And to live in a really amazing community here in Teaneck. And beyond that, I'm doing something that I deeply love. I'm very passionate about storytelling and creating, videos are, to me are much deeper than just videos. So the point is, to speak to someone else who is doing something that they're passionate about, I still look forward to Shabbos. I'm still like at the end of that week, on Friday, God willing, I'm going to feel this tomorrow after a long week of filming and editing and meetings and sending invoices and all these things. And that tells me something interesting about what I think is what I'm really passionate about. I've come to the conclusion I don't think I'm as passionate about my work as I am. I'm much more passionate about this vision that I have in my mind of having a Shabbos table surrounded by kids singing Zmiros. We said it before, like literally verbatim. This is like my bar for success is a Shabbos table surrounded by happy, healthy kids singing Zmiros and sharing Divrei Torah. That to me, I don't think. I mean, there might be some things that are a little bit better than that, like Fleischer Kiddush. But I think that and that completely changes, the way I look at doing doing work that you love. If you work, they say if you enjoy what you do, then you don't work a day in your life. It's not true. It's not true. I work so hard, and I do look forward to stopping that work. So Shabbos kind of gives us that interesting perspective.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I think even if you love what you do, work can be really tiring. And I sometimes wonder, and I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about myself, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. Do I love Shabbos because it forces me to turn off and be present, which I think is very real, and I think it's a very fundamental part of Shabbos. Although I think today somehow Shabbos gets framed in the world of technology, and I think Shabbos existed before technology, right? It's
Right,
like
exactly.
people say, like, Shabbos is awesome because I could turn off my phone. You could turn off your
Right.
phone during the week too.
It's
It's,
true.
it's an option. Goyim can also turn off their phone. It's an option. Maybe you're forced to, right? To put down your plow, right? Hundreds of years ago, whatever it is. And there is something very beautiful about being present. But are we looking forward to Shabbos because we're exhausted and it forces us to recuperate or maybe even rejuvenate? Or do we look forward to Shabbos because Shabbos puts the rest of the week into context? So I love your dream. I love your vision, right? We all want that, I think. It's such a beautiful thing to have a Shabbos table with Zmiros surrounded by the people that you love. I'm very blessed that my two daughters have stayed in the neighborhood after they got married. Almost without exception, every single Shabbos we have a meal with the entire family, the grandkids, the son-in-laws, and I love it. I
That's
love it. I
beautiful.
can't believe the nachas. Man, if somebody would have told me at 18 years old when I thought I was sacrificing for my Judaism, I was like, oh, I'm giving up this, I'm giving up that. Somebody whispered in my ear and said, grandchildren and son-in-laws. Trust me, man, it's worth it. I didn't know my Olam Hazeh was going to be awesome. I feel so blessed. When we start to see the work just as a means to an end, I think that's when the work becomes even more exhausting. Because it's like, if I won the lottery, then I wouldn't do this anymore. But, I know you now for, as we said, a couple of years. And as you were speaking, I couldn't help but smiling because you're like, I love storytelling. I'm like, yeah, you always did. You were always a person that enjoyed a good story, told a good story. I remember even when we were speaking about when you were in yeshiva, like this vision that you had of building this video production company, and you're like, I want to do it different. I want to not just make advertisements. I want to tell stories. I don't want to just do your standard videos. I want to communicate a message through a story. And you said that to me when you were like 18 or 19. So it's awesome to see that you're living that dream out. But if you won the lottery, I would hope that you would still do video production. And maybe you would kill off some things because they're not really fundamental to your mission. If I won the lottery, I think about this to myself all the time. If I won the lottery, would I still want to work in the Baseret? And the answer is yes. I might let go of certain responsibilities that I enjoy a little bit less. But yeah, I think I'd still want to work. I think I'd still want to do what I do. And that tells me that the thing that I'm doing is not just a means to an end. It's not just for a paycheck. If it was just for a paycheck, as soon as you have the money, you stop. Um, it's when you start to look at the thing that you're doing as inherently meaningful that it becomes. I don't want to say that it's not going to be tiring, because it is. It's tiring because it takes a lot of work. But I wonder if that's where it becomes less tiring, and maybe even the work itself can be rejuvenating. And so I think this is maybe where we need a little bit of a shift. Why is it that in these final moments before Mashiach, we're forced into positions now that are very different than the ones that we were living in hundreds of years ago? We work in corporate offices. We have more contact with the outside world. The Rambam, I'm always like, whenever I learn this Rambam, I'm always like so jealous. The Rambam says a person has a 12-hour day, they should work 3 hours and learn 9 hours. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what job gets you where you need to go for 3 hours? And we should ask ourselves, why did the world change? Why is it that the Rebbeinu Shalom created a world where you need to work 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day? Maybe it's because the work that needs to be done, we have to finish this process of bringing Hashem into our material lives. So we have to find the godliness within the things that we're doing. If we're an accountant or a lawyer or a businessman, commercial mortgages, Amazon, hard money lending, whatever, nursing homes, right? Whatever Jewish job you have,
Even cash advance.
cash advance, right? But the opportunity to do it that in a way that reveals Hashem in this world, being honest in business, being marba kvod shamayim in the world, where people see you and they go, that's the way a Jew behaves. One of my favorite stories is my wife, before we moved to Israel, at some point in her career, she was an actuary. And she was working for AIG, and her boss was Pat Riley, not that Pat Riley, not Pat Riley, the president of the Miami Heat. Pat Riley, like a nerdy Pat Riley who wore like a bow tie, an
That is
actuary
cool.
Pat Riley, not the slicked back hair Pat Riley. And she was in a meeting, and somebody used a swear word in the meeting. And afterwards, Pat Riley came over to her in her cubicle and he said, I want to apologize that somebody used that word in front of you. And don't worry, we're going to be speaking to HR about it, and we're going to confront him, and
Wow.
he's going to apologize to you. And my wife's like, I grew up with brothers, like, it's not like I haven't heard the word before. And he's like, no, but it's not appropriate. We know that you're Jewish and you're a person of great dignity. And when she came home and told me that, I was like, holy cow, like, what an unbelievable kvod shamayim, that just the dignity through which she held herself in that office, it meant we don't speak that way around Eliza. And there are real opportunities. And I think this is part of where it gets fragmented. It's like my work life and my Shabbos life. No, the goal of Shabbos is to bring the week into Shabbos and then take Shabbos into the week. I think Rav Tzadok HaKohen says that's why we turn around and bow backwards by Bowie Kala, Bowie Kala. We turn around and we usher our week into Shabbos, right? And then Havdalah brings Shabbos into the week, right? So like, and that's why we have Malav Malka. It's like we're taking the Kedusha of Shabbos into the week. And so it can't just be like, I can't wait to turn everything off and get to Shabbos, because then I think maybe we're missing the point of Shabbos. I know I'm struggling with this, but it has to be sort of more symbiotic, that the menucha of Shabbos, that sense of acha sha'alti, comes with us during the week, so that I know that maybe I'm doing videography and maybe I'm doing, invoices, and it might seem to me like I'm not doing something godly. The base medrash is godly, shul is godly, my Shabbos table is godly, but not my work. That's where it becomes fragmented. And that's the problem, I think.
This conversation reminds me of when I told my mom initially that I want to start my own business. It also attached to the conversation that I didn't want to pursue a traditional 4-year degree plan. I ended up getting an undergrad, but as you know, I went through TRIO. And like, I saw all these things like, oh, I couldn't imagine working for the big man. I can't imagine sitting in an office. I can't imagine just like living, getting the paycheck and like waiting for, like, oh, I can't imagine doing all these things. And like my mom said, like, listen, if this is what you want to do, for sure, but just take this perspective in mind. My mom right now, she's a manager at a big chain of banks mainly in Borough Park. They have branches all across the tri-state. But she said, like, I worked for the big man all my life. It is still possible to lead a meaningful life and live a meaningful life, because I know that every time I get that paycheck, there's a sigh of relief that I can pay my kids' yeshiva tuition. I can buy food for the Shabbos table where we can sing Zmiros and have an uplifting and comfortable and just a happy home. Like I grew up in such a happy home. Like things were, not obviously without issues that every family has, but like, and I think about that a lot. And I think to myself, like, who am I on my high horse saying that I can't do this? And like, I need this, I have a higher standard of what it means to have a meaningful work life. And it comes back to this whole thing. I think this idea applies to anyone who's working. Like there is room to see the, like you said, to see the godliness within the work that you do.
First of all, I mean, your parents are amazing because the fact that they were willing to allow you with really just sort of like this, I'm going to share a perspective, but this is your life and go for it, says a lot about the people that they are. I love the perspective that your mother shared. What your mother spoke about was the sense of security that comes with working for the man. That paycheck is steady, the job is steady, you do good work, you work with honorable people, you can have that job, you can make a career, and that career can be in service of your family, and that's an amazing thing to have. And you took a much more vulnerable, risky route because there's real value in working for yourself. If you listen to the really wealthy people, you listen to like the Mark Cubans of the world, they say I'd rather make $60,000 a year and work for myself than make, $160,000 and work for somebody else. And that's a certain type of personality. You definitely took the road less traveled. I hope you did, and I think you did. And I was there when you were making those decisions. I hope you did it because this was you following your soul and really listening to that inner voice of how do I want to express my talents in this world? I think anybody that's seen your videos has seen your talent on display, and
Thank you.
it's amazing to watch. I always, by the way, watch your videos whenever you post them on your status, not because I'm so interested in the content, but I'm always interested in seeing the artistry,
Thank you.
and you do an amazing job.
I appreciate it.
But I think because you chose to follow the the voice of your own soul, that's already a way of expressing that godliness. Hashem gave me a talent to tell a story through the medium of videography. And so I'm going to actualize that talent. And then taking a talent like that and starting a podcast like this is another actualization of that talent. And I think you keep pouring gasoline on that fire and you find the meaning that's in the work, right? And that lightens the load somewhat. Because if my mission is to build for Hashem a dwelling place in this world, it means I must engage in the material world. So people who never engage in the material world are abdicating their mission. People who fall for the trap of the material world, because it does naturally pull you in, and they're looking for that fancy car, the next house, the next vacation, right? They're also falling for the trap of the material world because they're looking at the shell, they're looking at the kli, they're not looking at the essence. But when you hit that middle, I'm engaging with the material world because I want to mine the nugget. I'm looking for the godliness that's within it, and I want to bring it out. And I want to make the world a place that's unified. We're sitting in the aftermath of the Ramot terrorist attack, right? Which is, 10 minutes from yeshiva. One of the Rebbeim's wives was a block away.
My wife's grandmother lives right there also.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Steiner's lives right there, and the stories that are coming out are already amazing that I'm sure you heard that one of the people that was killed, he actually had gotten into a tramp and somebody had pulled over on the side and said, I want to buy a gun. Does anybody want to come? And this guy got into the car. This rabbi got into the car. And then somebody knocked on the door and said, I really need to get to Shire Tzedek Hospital. He got out, let this other guy go in, and then the terrorist attack happened. And unfortunately, he lost his life. So there's two ways of looking at this. One is like,
Someone died.
how crazy is that? The other
Yeah.
is his last act in his life was this phenomenal act of chesed. So to me, you couldn't have a more bifurcated reality. On the one hand, you have a person who sees the oneness of everything. So he says, I'm going to be wherever I need to be. You clearly need to get to Shire Tzedek Hospital. You take my seat. Chesed, the oneness of chesed, right? And on the other hand, you have these terrorists who come in to murder innocent people on the side of the road in the name of peace, which is insane, right? And so that's the ultimate in fragmentation, right? The ultimate act of fragmentation is murdering somebody. the more that we engage in the world in a unified way, the more we bring out the unity of the world, the more peace, the more harmony. And that's the goal. The goal is to create a peaceful world, right? We want to create shalom. It's the end of Shemona Esrei, Sim Shalom. Right? That's the goal, to create a world of harmony that only comes from living a life of oneness. So you might think showing up in a godly way to work, it's like, what am I doing already? No, that's what you're doing. In everything that you do, you're revealing the unity of Hashem in this world, and that's bringing the world somewhere. And we are almost there. I know it seems like we're not because there's so much fragmentation in the world. But I think now more than ever, there's a need for serenity in the world. And that's because if Shabbos, let's say, is a 60th of what it will be like in Yemos HaMashiach, right? We're looking for Yom Shekulo Shabbos. We can already taste the serenity that comes with being in a balanced world. And so the yearning for it is greater. And so that's why these existential questions are bothering us more than ever before. It's because we're on the cusp. So it's like we could taste it. And perhaps what we need to do is act as if we're already there. Act as if we're living in the Zman of Mashiach, live a life of serenity, reveal that unity, live as if we're already there, and maybe that brings us that final step towards coming into the days of Mashiach.
What do you think are some practical steps that one can take to arrive at their definition of serenity? Or I guess I don't know if it's a relative, I guess serenity in its global sense.
I had a conversation with Dr. Josh Joseph this summer, president of the OU. We were sitting in Papagayos actually for for an NCSY appreciation. And we were schmoozing for like an hour, and I don't have to tell you, he's a brilliant man. And so I was talking about teaching young men and women today to live a service-driven life. And he pushed back and he said to me, a service-driven life is about having a mission-driven life. And so if you tell people live a life of service, it can seem like a burden. If you tell people this is your mission, own your mission, and be in service of that mission. And I think that's a very astute point that he's making. So I think, at least for me, having a real vision of what is my mission. And you're right, I think that's going to be personal for everybody, right? The general mission is we're here to serve Hashem, to build for Hashem a dwelling place in this world. First of all, it requires a tremendous amount of bittul. We have to be willing to say the mission is bigger than me. I was created for a purpose, and I have to stand in posture of humility towards that mission. That's obvious. Anytime ego is there, ego creates, or ego is the result of fragmentation, right? So I stand in a posture of fragmentation. I'm going to live a life of fragmentation. So humbling myself before the mission, that's huge. That's number one. But then within that mission, understanding I was created for a very specific mission. I have a specific moment that I was created for. And I don't know if it's one moment that I was created for or lots of moments that I was created for, but I have to stand ready to extract the talents that I was given to do something meaningful with, which again is why I loved what you did, right? You said, I'm not just going to stay on the hamster wheel. I have a specific talent and I have a need to actualize it. And yeah, it's safer the other way. So I think maybe what we could do is twofold. Number one, remember, I was created to serve Hashem. And so I stand in a humble posture towards that mission. But then also having enough of a sense of self to say, what am I here for? Like, what am I here for? I can't just be here to stay on the hamster wheel. I have too much talent to just be on the hamster wheel. And I have this real need to express myself. And then when you do that, then it's like you're wearing one hat, right? You're not wearing multiple hats. It's not Mordechai the father, and I'm Mordechai the husband, and I'm Mordechai the Rabbi. I'm Mordechai. Right? I'm Mordechai. And then Mordechai is playing not different characters, but there's different scenes. So if we're characters in a play, I'm only one character, but I have a lot of scenes. In scene one, a guy getting up in the morning to daven and to learn. In scene two, I'm going off to work. In scene three, I'm coming home and spending some time with my children. In scene four, I'm spending some time with my wife, but it's all me. And if I lose myself at any point, then yeah, I'm going to feel fundamentally disconnected. And that's really hard considering that a lot of us are struggling with that basic need of I have to make so much money and I have to take that corporate job and I don't get to express my talents.
I think
It's really frustrating for people.
Yeah, no, for sure. It definitely frustrates me, which is why I took a different path, but not without its, its negative sides to it as well. But I think self-expression is maybe overhyped sometimes. I think that I think nowadays especially, I feel like was self-expression a thing that people dealt with 200, 300 years ago? I feel like self-expression nowadays is I need to be me. I need to do me. I need to be myself. I can't just be a sheep. I have to do what everything opposite of what everyone else is doing. I don't know. Maybe it's always been like this. And I think that ties into ego. I think it's is it healthy? How much is healthy? How much self-expression is healthy?
I think maybe we're talking about two different things. Self expression, I think, is really healthy. I think when self expression becomes artificial is when it's not healthy, right? There's a counterfeit of self expression. I'm not sure I know the word yet is, but I think I know what you're talking about. If I have a need to like show how unique I am and to go against the grain for the sake of going against the grain. And by the way, that'll very often come out in very surface level ways. It's like if the way that you find self expression is through something very shallow, it's probably because it's not true self expression. It's like, I wear these sneakers. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure that that meets this. I don't know if we're talking
That's my
about the
entire
same.
personality.
Right, exactly. If my personality is now I put on Skechers, now I put on Vans, right? Or whatever the thing in your culture is. So then I think you've fallen short of self expression. Maybe it used to be that they didn't struggle with self expression because they had so much more time to be themselves. I mean, how many hours could you work the field? How many, you were living in a shtetl, how many shoes could you possibly make? How many people could afford shoes? And hey, you worked for as long as you could work for, but like there was ample room for self expression. In a fast paced society where somebody's working 8, 9 hours a day behind a desk doing things in a computer, maybe they don't have room for that creativity. And so maybe the need for that creativity is more exaggerated today because we don't have those outlets. So I agree with you, this sort of like fake authenticity that people are like putting on today. Like when you go into the echo chamber of social media and everyone's like somehow got their own unique way of saying the same exact thing that they all heard in their very curated life of the things that they subscribe to, that's not unique. You're not bringing your unique thoughts to the table. You're just echoing what everyone else said. I remember the first time I heard the phrase punching down. And then after I heard it for the first time, I heard it like a million times. Like everyone now is using that phrase and all in a very specific content. And they all think they're being like really authentic. Like they just came up with it. Yeah. Chaval, like you have a head. Like use your head. I want to hear what your unique thoughts are. And maybe because we don't have so much time to do that or so much space to do that in our lives, there's this exaggerated need for self expression in a way that's not actually servicing anyone.
I heard this quote. When you want to be excellent, there's no balance. What do you think about that quote?
The exact opposite. I think
Right.
the exact opposite. I think there is no excellence without balance. Maybe what he meant to say is there's no excellence without focus. There's no excellence without dedication. There's no excellence without sacrifice. But excellence without balance isn't excellence because balance, as the way we defined it, is in the service of that one thing, right? Imagine a company has a very specific mission, right? The specific mission of Steve Jobs that year was to build the iPhone, right? So it required sacrifice. I mean, other things in the company, like the iPod, got killed off along the way. It required dedication, right? Late hours and starting from scratch and making sure they got it right. And so it required sacrifice and focus and dedication, sure. But they never would have said the excellence of creating the iPhone was the lack of balance for the rest of the company because
Right.
the goal of the company at that moment was to create the iPhone. And if a person says, well, I want to live a life of excellence, so then I'm not going to spend time with my wife, I'm not going to spend time with my kids, I'm not going to spend time on my personal growth, I'm not going to spend time religiously, I'm just going to make a tremendous amount of money. You might have succeeded in that specific mission. I don't think that that was a very balanced life. I think you probably lost a lot of really important things along the way.
Probably.
I actually heard this said once from Jordan Peterson, and he was talking about the sacrifice that it takes to be CEO. And the reason why people don't want to be CEO is because you'll have to give up a lot of things along the way. If you really want to be CEO, that's going to be late nights and it's going to be losing time with your family and it's going to be taking away time from yourself. And it's not obvious that a person would want that. So there's a reason why people don't become the CEO. It's not always because they can't be, it's because they don't want to be, because for them, that's not balanced.
We're approaching the end of the episode. I have a couple more things to bring up. I actually didn't think of bringing this up until a few moments ago. Mm, I had a call with my dad. I'm blessed to be able to be vulnerable and like open with my dad. And like I told him, like I feel so like worn. It was over the summer, and it was a hard summer job, and I won't mention whatever. But it was just
I saw it, and you did great.
yeah. Thank you, I appreciate it. But it would not without its challenges. Like it was like more emotion. We're not getting into the nitty gritty. It was really challenging. I called my dad up and I said, like, I'm burnt out by the work. The work is so hard for me. Why am I doing this? Like, I'm not seeing my wife and my newborn son nearly as much as a result of this. Like, I feel like I'm sacrificing the wrong thing here, even though again, it was a good paycheck, but like still. He just brought something up to me, and like, I don't know why it made me feel better. He probably knows why. He just told me, like, this is just the reality of, like, this is like the result of Adam and Chava. I don't know. I'm like, first I'm like, why are you bringing this up? And like he was saying how, you know, this is the way, things are. And to a certain extent, you have to accept it and know that you're not doing the wrong thing. Know that you're, like this is a result of the sin of Adam and Chava. I know we're unpacking a crazy separate conversation. We don't have to get so into it. Maybe hey, we can make a summarized version of how should a Jewish entrepreneur, creator, worker see himself within the context of the sin of Adam and Chava, particularly the man, why the man has to work, although there are women as well who are working.
First of all, you're so blessed that you can have those conversations with your dad.
I am, yeah.
Especially because you took the road that your parents weren't necessarily, they were supportive, but it wasn't necessarily what they would have chosen for you. So the fact that you have that vulnerability with
sure.
your dad is amazing.
It's the
It says a
best.
lot about who your parents are. And the fact that your parents were able to give you an answer that was meaningful to you, that's also great. And, having a father who can answer you with such a philosophical type of answer also says a lot about where you came from. And I also, again, just want to highlight the yearning, right? The yearning to do this well, the yearning to not just make that big paycheck. I don't want to sacrifice the wrong thing. I know that greatness comes with sacrifice, but you got to sacrifice the right thing, right? So like in Yiddishkeit, we don't sacrifice our children, right? We sacrifice our animal soul, right? We bring our animal soul, carbon, from a lashon of karov, we draw close through sacrificing the animalistic desire. Instead, we seek to have the sublime desires of the nefesh elokis, of the godly soul, right? So the fact that you're like, I'm doing this, but it doesn't feel right. Am I sacrificing the wrong thing? Is the yearning to sacrifice the right thing. So there's something very beautiful about that also. I think what your father probably meant to say, I'm assuming that your father was quoting the Ramchal from Darach Hashem, that the world existed in a state of balance. In other words, there was 50%, 50% good, 50% evil, or 50% true, 50% false. If you're talking about the Rambam and the Moreh Nevuchim, Adam's sin tilted it the wrong way, right? And so now we live in a state of fragmentation. Whereas if Adam would not have sinned, if he would have been able to hold back his creativity, right? Because that's what Adam did not do, right? He didn't hold back. He was told, you can do anything, just don't do one thing. It's harder to not do. Human beings are so creative that we have a need to do. He was like, Adam Rishon was like, you want me to serve you by doing nothing? Like, that feels wrong. I have something to contribute. And so, but the ultimate humility would have been, I'm serving Hashem in the way that Hashem says he wants to be served. So holding back from that creativity would have been appropriate. And he would have been able to eat, Chazal say, from the Eitz Hadas on Shabbos. And now Shabbos is the cessation of creativity. Adam Rishon could have expressed his creativity on Shabbos. Now Shabbos is the opposite of that. And so there's a lot to talk about when it comes to the sin of Adam and Chava. And you're right, that'd probably be, like 20
2
episodes.
Yeah, literally.
Maybe one thing we could say, it's true that Adam Rishon made that mistake. And now we live in a world of fragmentation. But fragmentation has an opportunity. It's not that it was a mistake, right? Because Hashem's plan is always going to be Hashem's plan, and we have no ability to disrupt Hashem's plan. So it seems that Hashem's plan is that the creation of chaos that we created, right? So God creates the world in a state of balance, right? Could go either way, right? We put it this way, and the world goes into the ultimate balance, right? Of Olam Haba. We go this way, right? And now we're sitting in this fragmented reality. So it's like you could say, like, and now everything is broken. Or you could say, it's better that we created the chaos so that we can have the opportunity to discover the order within the chaos. And that's a really beautiful thing to do. And that's why we're called upon to work. Right? So the work is not a punishment. The work is, well, if you're going to create chaos, now go to work. You created chaos, and now the material seems to be divorced from godliness. So go rediscover the godliness within the material world. Go to work. Go to work is not a bad thing. Go to work is a religious imperative. This is Hashem's calling to us. Go to work. We're all called upon to work. That's what we do. We work the world, right? Adam Rishon was put into Gan Eden, la'avda u'lashamra. We're here to work. So it's not an accident. It's not a mistake. Nothing happened that was outside of Hashem's plan. So when we're going to work, that's why we're going to work. We're going to work because Adam Rishon sinned, and now we have an opportunity to reveal Hashem within the material world. Had Adam Rishon not sinned, the world would never have been imperfect. There's beauty to imperfection, which, by the way, again, especially now in Yemos HaMashiach, this is like the work of all the therapists, is to tell people it's okay to be imperfect. Like, why is that the avoda in these moments before Mashiach comes? Because we have to acknowledge that there's imperfection and that there's godliness within the imperfection. So it's like I'm there in the summer and there's frustrations on the job and why am I doing this? And the paycheck is good, but I'm sacrificing the wrong thing. That's the condition. That's the condition of the world. When you figure all that out and you can put it into that Acha Sha'alti matrix and you have that Shabbos matrix of everything is unified, that's when things start to become rectified.
Beautiful. My last question, maybe to kind of tie it all together, it could be a key takeaway, something that you maybe have already said on this episode, or maybe something you have yet to say, is I'm going to leave it somewhat open ended, if that's okay. What does a Jewish entrepreneur, creator, worker look like?
That's a big question. I have a friend whose name is Rami Goldberg. Rami Goldberg and I went to Mevaseret together in 1998. Baruch Hashem, we remain friends until today. I think I mentioned to you, you should have him on the podcast.
For
Like,
sure.
this
He's
is
on
what
my
he
list.
does. He does like Jewish entrepreneur. Like, that's his thing. He actually comes to yeshiva every year now and speaks about what it means to be a Jewish entrepreneur. Rami recently did a podcast that he sent to me, and I had the opportunity to listen to it. And he was talking about how he initially started off in chinuch, and he was fired from his job in chinuch. And they said, this is not working. And then he went out and got a job. And in this podcast, he was talking about how chinuch wasn't his calling. He thought it was. It was like, like the frum thing to do.
Right.
And it actually wasn't the greatest expression of his talents. And he ended up starting this company, and he employs a lot of people. And Baruch Hashem, he's been zocheh to give a lot of tzedakah, and the company is here in Israel. And so all of those things are actually the things that are Rami's Acha Shoalti, right? Providing parnasa for Jews living in Eretz Israel and the opportunity to use the money that he makes in a godly way by supporting important institutions and contributing to the Jewish community. Rami has since retired from that position. He's been able to give his company over to another CEO, and he sits on the board. And now he works for another organization. And it's also, I don't want to, I'll let him speak for himself what he does, but it's, another mission that he personally has in his life. To me, that's a Jewish entrepreneur. A Jewish entrepreneur is somebody who sees his business opportunity as a way of being marba kvod shamayim in the world. He used his specific talents and it aligned with his specific values. To me, that's a Jewish entrepreneur. My father, again, I'm turning to my father. My father was a successful businessman, and my father was the Jew. In the world of advertising, there were not that many Orthodox Jews. I think he was like the first Orthodox Jew in the world of advertising back in the day. And I grew up knowing that my dad was a proudly Orthodox Jew in the world of advertising. And that was like a big deal for him. I remember once when we were little, we had Shabbos in New York City. Very rare, very, very rare for us. 5 towns kid. And we had Shabbos, we stayed in a hotel, and we davened in a shul. I don't remember which shul it was, but we davened in a shul in the city. And it was because my father said to his company, I keep Shabbos. They said, you cannot miss this meeting. He said, if you'll put my family up in a hotel for Shabbos, I can make the meeting. But if I can't be with my family for Shabbos, I can't make the meeting. And the company put us up in a hotel for Shabbos. That's being marba kvod shamayim. and we would have at our Pesach Seder, Jews who were not affiliated, they would come to my Pesach Seder because they worked with my dad. And my father would invite them to come for our Pesach Seder. We had a very fascinating Pesach Seder. So if the opportunity to make money can align with something that's really a fundamental part of your mission, that's awesome. If it can't, that's okay too. If I'm using the money for what I believe are fundamentally meaningful things, right? So obviously it's best if you could line it up. If you can't line it up, it's like, well, I'm an accountant. How in the world is that Jewish? I would argue that you could be Marbet Vod in the workforce. But if you feel like that's not enough for you, okay, but let's stay focused on the goal. I'm making that money so that I could give this life to my children, a life that is aligned with making Hashem the center of our lives and the center of our world. In other words, what I'm saying to you is a Jewish entrepreneur understands that the mission is serving Hashem, and this is one aspect, just like being a husband, just like being a father, just like going to davening and learning. This is just another slice of that pie. And we should be careful in the way that we're educating our children not to diminish any one of these slices. They're all important. And it's true that we're going to say Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. You got to put the muscle of you put the big rocks first in the vase, right? If you have like that glance, you have to put the big rocks in first, and then you put the smaller ones, and then you could put the pebbles. It's true. Chazal said, they were clear about this. You got to put the big rocks in first. You have to be Koveya Itim Torah. That's got to come first. The first thing is I must have in my day davening. I must have in my day learning. The reason is because otherwise I won't be focused on anything else. That's how we become fragmented. If I don't start off my day with the intention and the consciousness of tefillah, then the rest of my day is not going to be for Hashem. If I'm not making time to connect to Hashem's Torah, my mind is going to go where it shouldn't go. Right? So I have to train my mind to see Hashem in the world. That's why we learn Torah. Davening, learning may have primacy in the sense that they come first, but they come first not to diminish the other things, but so that the other things can be included within this larger mission.
Beautiful. I want to say this has been awesome. It's always a really deep pleasure speaking with you. I
It's
want to know
always
that
awesome hanging out
I
with
want you
you.
to know there's no podcast, by the way. This is just a silly excuse for me to get a chance to sit down with you for an hour and speak. No,
I'll
but
take it. I'm always happy to have an excuse to hang out with you. I was happy to have an excuse to hang out with you in yeshiva. I'm certainly happy to have an excuse with you afterwards.
that means the world to me. Rabbi Mordechai Burg, you're a Rebbe, author, speaker. Where can people find what you speak about, write about?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm online,
Around.
Nitzotzos. There's a Spotify, Apple podcast, whatever, where the shiurim are recorded. Working on a new sefer, which God willing will come out one of these decades.
That's awesome. So exciting.
Yeah. Some of the
Right.
concepts that we touched upon in this podcast are in that sefer.
Amazing.
And where can people find me? I don't know. Wherever I am, that's where I can be found.
Beautiful. Rabbi, thank you so much for the time again. And thank you everyone for listening.
Love you, Tzvi.
Love you too, brother. Okay.